The search dog kept circling a specific spot in the forest, refusing to follow commands. "Control your animal," the captain demanded. But when they finally dug where she indicated, what they found beneath the soil left the entire search team frozen in shock. The early morning fog hung over Evergreen Ridge Forest like a ghostly veil, transforming the towering pines into shadowy sentinels. Officer Cassandra Winters pulled her jacket tighter against the autumn chill as she surveyed the training area, her breath forming small clouds in the crisp air. Beside her, Nova, her 5-year-old Belgian Malinois, stood alert. Dark ears pricked forward in anticipation, intelligent eyes scanning the tree line. "Weather's perfect for scent work today," remarked Captain Gabriel Morgan, approaching with a clipboard in hand. "Humidity holds the odors close to the ground. Your girl should have no trouble with today's exercise." Cassandra nodded, adjusting the specialized search vest on Nova's muscular frame. "She's been restless all morning. I think she knows it's not just another training day." Around them, 4 other K-9 teams prepared for the exercise, handlers checking equipment, while their dogs waited with varying degrees of patience. The autumn leaves crunched underfoot as Captain Morgan gathered the group for a final briefing. "We've placed 6 training aids throughout this quadrant," he explained, unfolding a topographical map across the hood of his department SUV. "Standard human remains scent pads buried at different depths in environmental conditions. This isn't about speed, it's about accuracy and documentation." Cassandra felt a familiar tightness in her chest as she observed the other handlers. 3 years into her K-9 career, she still sometimes questioned whether she belonged among these experienced officers. Her transfer to the K-9 unit had come after a particularly difficult case in homicide that had left her questioning her future in law enforcement altogether. Working with Nova had been both her salvation and her greatest challenge. Her mind drifted briefly to the Harper case, the triple homicide that had nearly broken her. 3 children ages 4 through 8 discovered in their home after neighbors reported not seeing them for days. The scene had haunted her dreams for months afterward. No amount of therapy had fully erased those images, but Nova had somehow pulled her back from the edge of despair, giving her a new purpose when she'd nearly lost all faith in humanity. "Winters, you and Nova will take the northeast section," Captain Morgan directed, pointing to an area marked in blue on the map. "Remember, this is a certification exercise. Every alert needs to be properly documented. No exceptions." "Understood, Captain," Cassandra replied, checking her GPS unit one last time before setting out. Nova moved with practiced discipline at her side alert, but contained, saving her energy for the work ahead. The northeast quadrant was the most challenging terrain in the training area, dense with underbrush and fallen trees, exactly why Morgan had assigned it to them. Despite his professional demeanor, Cassandra knew the captain still harbored doubts about Nova's reliability. The Malinois' independent nature and occasional stubborn streak had earned her a reputation among the K-9 trainers. "All right, girl," Cassandra murmured as they reached their starting point. "Let's show them what you can do. Find..." Released from her heel position, Nova immediately transformed from obedient companion to working professional. Her nose dropped to the ground, then lifted to sample the air currents. Cassandra followed at a careful distance, clipboard in hand, watching Nova work her trained search grid. The shepherd moved with practiced precision, quartering into the wind, her nose continuously sampling the air for the faintest trace of human remains scent. 30 minutes into the exercise, Nova had already successfully located 2 of the training aids, sitting perfectly to indicate each find, while Cassandra documented the locations. As they moved deeper into the forest, the terrain grew more challenging, with dense underbrush and fallen logs creating natural obstacles. The filtered sunlight created dappled patterns on the forest floor, a beautiful tableau that belied the grim nature of their work. Cassandra had learned to appreciate these moments of solitude with Nova, away from the scrutiny of colleagues who still saw her as the detective who'd burned out after the Harper case. That investigation, the discovery of 3 children murdered by their father, had shattered something in her, a break that even 2 years of therapy hadn't fully repaired. Working with Nova had provided a different kind of healing, a partnership based on trust and nonverbal communication that somehow filled the void left by her disillusionment with humanity. Suddenly, Nova's methodical pattern changed. The dog's head snapped up nose, working rapidly as she sampled the air. Without warning, she veered sharply left away from their assigned search area. "Nova, this way," Cassandra called, using the hand signal to redirect her partner. But for the first time in their 3 years together, Nova ignored the command completely. The Malinois moved with increasing urgency, pushing through a dense thicket of brambles toward an area that wasn't part of the training ground. Her body language had transformed. Tail straight muscles, tense ears rigidly forward. "Novi," Cassandra called more sharply, a flutter of concern replacing her initial irritation. This wasn't like her partner at all. In the distance, she saw Captain Morgan, watching his expression shifting from curiosity to disapproval as Nova continued off course. Cassandra keyed her radio. "Captain Nova's alerting on something outside our quadrant I'm following to investigate." Negative Winters came the immediate response, "Get your dog back on track. We have a schedule to maintain." Cassandra hesitated, watching as Nova reached a clearing nearly 70 yards beyond their assigned area. The dog began circling a specific spot near a cluster of fallen trees, her movements becoming increasingly frantic. Then Nova did something she was explicitly trained not to do. She began to dig front paws, attacking the earth with desperate intensity. "Something's wrong," Cassandra murmured, breaking into a jog toward her partner. By the time she reached the clearing, Nova was whining a high-pitched sound of distress as she circled and returned to dig at the same spot. Captain Morgan arrived moments later, irritation evident on his face. "Officer Winters, this is unacceptable. Control your—" His words died as he watched Nova's behavior more closely. 20 years of K9 experience told him this wasn't defiance or distraction. "That's not a training response," he said quietly, eyes narrowing as he studied the ground where Nova continued to circle and dig. "That's a real alert. Get me a shovel." Cassandra called to a nearby trainee, never taking her eyes off Nova, who continued circling and pawing at the earth with growing desperation. The dog's behavior had shifted from excited to almost frantic, her whines becoming more urgent. The trainee returned with 2 shovels, and Cassandra began carefully removing layers of soil and forest debris. Where Nova indicated 6 inches down, she noticed the first discrepancy roots that had been cleanly cut, rather than naturally grown around obstacles. The soil structure was different too, less compacted than the surrounding earth. "Someone's dug here before," she said quietly, exchanging a glance with Morgan, whose skepticism was rapidly fading. They continued digging methodically, creating a wider perimeter around Nova's alert spot. The air felt heavier with each inch of soil removed. The forest sounds seemed to fade away as they focused on the task. 12 inches down, Cassandra's shovel struck something that wasn't stone or root. The dull thud sent a chill up her spine. "Hold up," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She immediately stopped, dropping to her knees beside the shallow hole. With gloved hands, she began carefully brushing away the remaining soil, working with the precision she'd learned in evidence recovery training. The surrounding officers fell completely silent. The only sound, Nova's steady panting as she remained fixed at the grave's edge, her body tense with certainty. A training officer turned away, unable to watch as more soil was cleared. "Oh God," Cassandra whispered as her gloved fingers uncovered what was unmistakably human fingers, partially decomposed but clearly recognizable. The pale skin contrasted starkly against the dark earth, the reality of their discovery impossible to deny. Morgan's face had gone ashen, his earlier skepticism completely evaporated. He stepped back, pulling out his radio with a hand that trembled slightly despite his years of experience. "This is Captain Morgan at the Northeast Training Grounds," he said, his voice professional but tight. "We have a 1029 possible human remains. I need the on-call detective forensics and county coroner to my GPS location immediately. Coordinates to follow." Nova remained at the grave's edge, her posture vigilant but calmer now, as if satisfied her message had finally been understood. Cassandra placed a reassuring hand on the Malinois' shoulder, a silent acknowledgement of her persistence. Within minutes, the quiet forest clearing had become a hub of controlled activity. Yellow crime scene tape marked a wide perimeter around the discovery site, and officers began documenting the scene with photographs and notes. Detective Alexandra Reyes arrived 30 minutes later, her department SUV navigating the narrow Forest Service road to reach the scene. The tall, broad-shouldered detective had worked with K-9 teams before and immediately respected the perimeter protocols as she approached. "What do we have?" she asked, pulling on latex gloves. "Human remains detective," Morgan reported. "Initially discovered by Officer Winter's cadaver dog during training. We've confirmed one hand, visible approximately 14 inches below ground level." The forensic team arrived shortly after setting up portable lights, even though it was midday. The dense forest canopy created perpetual twilight on the forest floor. As they carefully continued the excavation process, the grim reality became clear. The body of a young male, likely in his teens, lay in a shallow grave that had been covered with forest debris in an attempt to conceal it. Based on decomposition, I'd estimate he's been here 3 to 4 months. The county medical examiner noted, carefully examining what they could see without disturbing the crime scene. "No obvious cause of death visible yet." Detective Reyes surveyed the scene with methodical attention, her experienced eyes taking in every detail as the forensic team continued their careful excavation. "Officer Winters," she called, gesturing Cassandra closer to the gravesite. "Tell me about your dog's initial alert. Anything unusual about it?" Cassandra nodded, keeping a firm hand on Nova's lead. "She broke protocol completely, which she's never done in 3 years of work or training, ignored commands, abandoned the search pattern, and led me directly here. Her alert was extreme, frantic digging, circling, vocalizing classic cadaver indication, but with unusual intensity. Worried you are." Nova had indeed remained focused, her attention shifting between the grave and an area several yards to the east. Her body language was clear to Cassandra. There was more evidence to be found. "She's trained in human remains detection, but she's also scent discriminating." Cassandra explains she can differentiate between the main source and secondary evidence associated with it. Reyes nodded. "Show me." Cassandra adjusted her grip on Nova's lead. "Find more, Nova, show me." Released from her strict sit-stay, Nova immediately moved to the eastern edge of the clearing nose, working close to the ground. She stopped abruptly, indicating a specific spot beneath a fallen log with the same focused sitting posture she used in training. Forensic technicians carefully examined the area, uncovering a cigarette butt wedged between the log and the forest floor. 6 feet beyond, Nova alerted again, leading them to a blood-stained handkerchief partially buried under leaves. "Bag those separately and mark them as potential DNA sources." Reyes instructed, a new respect in her eyes as she watched Nova work. "That dog is worth her weight in gold." As the afternoon progressed, the victim was fully excavated, revealing the body of a teenage boy. No obvious wounds were visible through his clothing, but the unnatural position suggested trauma before death. As the search teams organized their grid pattern, Cassandra took a moment to give Nova a water break in a quiet spot away from the center of activity. Watching her partner, Cassandra couldn't help reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought them together. 3 years earlier, the Malinois had initially been part of a specialty training program run by Dr. Nathan Foster, a renowned veterinary behaviorist who had developed innovative techniques for scent detection dogs. Nova had been singled out for her exceptional olfactory abilities, but also flagged as potentially unsuitable for standard police work due to her independent nature. She follows her nose over commands when she believes she's right. Dr. Foster had told Cassandra during their first meeting, the sophisticated training facility, a stark contrast to the municipal K-9 unit, where Cassandra had just been assigned. Most handlers want predictability above all else. Nova needs someone who understands that sometimes the dog knows better than the human. Cassandra had seen something different in Nova than the other potential handlers. Not defiance, but extraordinary conviction. Where others saw a problematic K-9, she recognized a dog with rare gifts that simply needed the right partner. Their connection had been immediate and profound, with Nova responding to Cassandra's patient handling style in ways that surprised even Dr. Foster. She needs someone who will trust her when she breaks protocol for good reason. The doctor had said watching them work together for the first time. She's never wrong when she goes off script like that. She's just following scent data we humans can't perceive. The specialized training Dr. Foster had developed included techniques rarely used in standard police K9 programs, teaching dogs to detect trace amounts of human decomposition, virtually undetectable by instruments, to discriminate between multiple human scents at a scene, and to work independently when following complex scent trails. Back at the command post established at the Forest Service Road, Detective Reyes had set up a makeshift investigation center in the back of her SUV. Her laptop displayed a database of missing persons reports as she cross-referenced details from the crime scene. Male Caucasian, approximately 16 to 18 years old, athletic build. She muttered, filtering the search parameters. Last 4 months within a 100-mile radius. Cassandra approached after getting Nova settled with the search team coordinator. Any matches? Reyes nodded grimly, turning the screen toward her. 3 potentials, but this one's most promising. Jason Bennett, 17, reported missing 4 months ago. Last seen hiking in Riverdale Park, about 20 miles southeast of here. The screen displayed the image of a smiling teenager with chestnut brown hair and clear blue eyes. He wore a Letterman jacket from Lakeview High School, the same navy blue color as the tattered backpack they'd found with the body. Riverdale is 20 miles from here, Cassandra observed. How would he end up in Evergreen Ridge? She'll be. That's the question. Reyes agreed, scrolling through the original missing persons report. According to this, Jason was an experienced hiker, Eagle Scout on his school's cross-country team. Not the type to get lost or wander that far off trail. A forensic technician approached with a sealed evidence bag containing the recovered backpack. Detective, we found a student ID in the side pocket, partially degraded but still legible. Reyes examined the plastic ID card through the clear evidence bag, then looked back at her screen. Jason Bennett, Lakeview. Hi, it's him. She immediately reached for her phone. I need to contact the family. They've been waiting for answers for 4 months. The original investigation had focused entirely on Riverdale Park, operating on the assumption that Jason had suffered an accident or become lost. No one had considered foul play, and certainly no one had thought to search in a completely different forest miles away. This wasn't a hiking accident, Cassandra said quietly, looking toward the crime scene. Someone intentionally buried him here, away from where anyone would think to look. With daylight fading, portable lights illuminated the forest clearing as the expanded search operation continued. 3 additional K9 teams had arrived to assist, each with different specialties, tracking evidence detection, and another HRD dog to confirm Nova's findings. Cassandra and Nova led a team north from the gravesite, the Malinois, moving with renewed energy. Despite the hours of work, Nova's pace had quickened, her tail position indicating growing excitement as they moved through a dense section of pine trees. The terrain sloped gently downward toward what appeared to be a small natural clearing about half a mile from the burial site. Looks like somebody camped here, observed Officer Tanner, one of the evidence technicians, shining a flashlight on a fire ring constructed from rocks around it, partially buried in leaves and dirt. They found discarded beer cans, food wrappers, and the remains of a temporary campsite. Nova focused particularly on several beer cans near the fire ring, sitting to indicate significant evidence. When the technicians photographed and bagged these items, Nova moved to the edge of the clearing where tire tracks were faintly visible in a patch of muddy ground that had been protected from the elements by overhanging branches. What have we got? Reyes asked as she arrived. Campsite recently used but deliberately obscured. Tanner reported beer cans fire, pit evidence of multiple people, and these tire tracks suggest they drove in through the old logging road rather than hiking in from the trails. Nova continued working the perimeter of the clearing, suddenly alerting strongly, near a pile of rocks at the eastern edge. Carefully removing the rocks one by one, the evidence technicians uncovered a cell phone. Its screen shattered, but the device otherwise intact. It had been deliberately hidden beneath the rock pile, placed in a plastic bag that had protected it from moisture. "Good girl," Cassandra whispered to Nova, who maintained her focused sit beside the evidence, waiting for her handler's next command. In that moment, Cassandra felt a surge of pride in her partner that overshadowed any lingering doubts about her career path. This was why she joined K9 for moments like this, when a dog's extraordinary abilities could bring truth to light when nothing else could. The forest investigation continued through the night and into the next morning, with teams working in shifts to process the widening crime scene. The preliminary DNA results confirmed the blood on the handkerchief matched Jason Bennett's type, and the tech team had recovered text messages, photos, and location data from the days before he disappeared. The photos showed 4 teenagers at the campsite. They discovered yesterday Jason Bennett was easily identifiable, smiling alongside 3 other boys. They were drinking beer around the campfire, their expressions carefree and animated. These directly contradict the statements his friends gave police. Reyes noted, they claimed they canceled the trip and Jason went hiking alone to Riverdale Park. These photos show all 4 of them were here together. The medical examiner completed the preliminary examination, determining cause of death to be blunt force trauma to the back of the skull, a single powerful impact with a rounded object. There was also a fractured cheekbone, suggesting a physical altercation before the fatal blow. As preparations continued for the afternoon's interrogations, an unexpected break in the case arrived in the form of Forest Ranger Trevor Wilson. The veteran ranger had heard about the discovery on his radio and immediately recognized the location from the coordinates. About 4 months back would have been early June, I encountered a group of young men camping illegally in that exact clearing. Wilson explained, 3 teenagers, all male. They had a lifted Jeep Wrangler, bright red with oversized tires. I approached them about the illegal camping and vehicle use on a closed road. "Did you notice anything unusual about their behavior?" Reyes pressed. The ranger considered thoughtfully. "They seemed nervous, but I chalked it up to being caught breaking the rules. One thing did stand out. They had a lot of camping gear, but it was mostly untouched tents, still packed sleeping bags rolled up. But their fire had been burning a while, and there were a lot of empty beer cans like they were preparing to leave in a hurry." "Like they'd been interrupted," Cassandra suggested. "Exactly," Wilson nodded. "I assumed they were just spooked by getting caught. Now I'm wondering if I interrupted them after..." He trailed off, the implication clear. Reyes pulled up the yearbook photos of Jason's 3 friends on her laptop. "Any of these look familiar?" Wilson studied the images, pointing without hesitation. This one was definitely there. He was pretty confrontational until the bigger kid calmed him down. He indicated another photo. "That looks like the bigger one." This unexpected witness account significantly strengthened the case. Wilson's encounter had likely occurred shortly after Jason's death, possibly as the remaining teenagers were preparing to flee the scene. The interview room at the county sheriff's department was deliberately austere, a simple table, 4 chairs, and a one-way observation mirror reflecting the nervous face of Kevin Mitchell. At 17, he looked younger than his age, shoulders hunched defensively as he sat beside his mother and their hastily retained attorney. "Kevin," Detective Reyes began, "I'm investigating the death of Jason Bennett, whose body was discovered yesterday in Evergreen Ridge Forest." Kevin, the teenager's eyes widened slightly, but he maintained a reasonably composed expression. "That's terrible," he said, voice steady. "Jason was my friend. We were all devastated when he disappeared." "Yes, I've read your statement from 4 months ago," Reyes replied, opening her folder. "You told Detective Santos that the 4 of you had planned a hiking trip to Riverdale Park, but you 3 canceled, leaving Jason to go alone." Kevin nodded quickly. "That's right, I had a family thing come up." "And yet," Reyes continued calmly, spreading out several printed photographs across the table, "we have photographic evidence that all 4 of you were camping together in Evergreen Ridge Forest, not hiking in Riverdale Park." She placed the recovered photos from Jason's phone in front of Kevin. These were taken the day Jason allegedly went hiking alone. The color drained from Kevin's face as he stared at the incriminating images. 4 smiling teenagers mugging for the camera beer cans. Visible Jason clearly alive and part of the group. "Oh my God," Kevin's mother whispered, her hand covering her mouth. His attorney leaned forward, professionally composed but clearly startled. "Where did these come from?" "Jason's phone," Reyes answered, adding another piece of evidence, a photo of the recovered device in its evidence bag. "Recovered from where it was deliberately hidden under rocks near your campsite. The same campsite where a forest ranger encountered 3 young men with a red Jeep Wrangler registered to Tyler Wade's father." Reyes then placed a map on the table marking both Riverdale Park and Evergreen Ridge Forest. "You told police to search 20 miles from where he actually was." "That's not just lying, Kevin. That's deliberate misdirection. My client doesn't have to respond to these accusations," the attorney interjected, but Kevin was already crumbling under the weight of the evidence. "It was an accident." He blurted, tears welling in his eyes as he ignored his attorney's attempt to silence him with a hand on his arm. "We never meant for any of it to happen. You have to believe me." Over the next hour, the terrible truth emerged through Kevin's halting confession. The 4 friends had brought a substantial amount of alcohol, drinking heavily around the campfire into the night. Jason and Tyler got into an argument. Kevin explained, eyes fixed on the table. "Something stupid about Tyler's girlfriend. It got heated, then physical." According to Kevin, Marcus had initially tried to separate them, but soon joined Tyler's side as the confrontation escalated. Jason, outnumbered, had attempted to leave, packing his belongings and demanding Tyler drive him back to his car. Tyler refused. He was too drunk to drive anyway. Jason said he'd walk out and call his father for a ride. That's when Marcus shoved him. Jason fell backward and hit his head on the fire ring. There was blood everywhere and he wasn't moving. The 3 teenagers had panicked, realizing Jason was dead, and they were miles from help, intoxicated and trespassing on closed forest land. It was Tyler's idea to bury him. Kevin continued, his voice barely audible. "He said it was an accident, but no one would believe us because we'd been drinking. They said we'd all go to prison." They had buried Jason's body away from the campsite, gathered their equipment, and fled the next morning. They drove Jason's car to Riverdale Park and left it at the trailhead, creating the false narrative that he had gone hiking alone. By evening, all 3 teenagers had been arrested and charged, Tyler and Marcus with manslaughter and evidence tampering, Kevin with accessory after the fact and obstruction of justice. Their carefully constructed deception had collapsed completely in the face of overwhelming evidence and Kevin's detailed confession. "They almost got away with it," Reyes remarked to Cassandra as they watched the 3 being processed. "If not for Nova's extraordinary abilities, Jason might have remained missing forever." 3 days after Jason Bennett's body was found, Cassandra stood with Nova at the edge of the forest clearing that had become a makeshift memorial. Jason's parents had visited the site that morning, leaving flowers and photos of their son against a towering pine tree. "Your dog changed everything," said a quiet voice behind her. Cassandra turned to find Laura Bennett, Jason's mother, approaching with her husband, Michael. Though grief had etched deep lines in their faces, they carried themselves with dignity. "We wanted to thank you personally," Michael said, his voice rough with emotion. "The detective told us how Nova found Jason during a training exercise, how she refused to leave until someone investigated. She's very persistent when she knows she's right," Cassandra replied softly, a lump forming in her throat as Laura knelt to Nova's level. The Malinois sat perfectly still, her usual professional demeanor softening slightly as she allowed Jason's mother to gently stroke her head. There was something profound in the moment, a connection between the woman who had lost her son and the dog who had finally brought him home. 4 months of not knowing was unbearable, Laura whispered. The nightmares were always about him out there, alone, lost, waiting for someone to find him. At least now we can lay him to rest properly. Later, as the sunset painted the western sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Cassandra took Nova to their favorite quiet spot, a bluff overlooking the river valley where they often ended difficult days. The Malinois sat beside her handler, both of them watching the changing colors in comfortable silence. The events of the past few days had taken their toll on both of them. Nova had worked nearly 20 hours straight during the initial investigation, refusing rest until Cassandra had finally insisted. Even now, after being officially relieved from the case, the Malinois maintained an air of quiet vigilance, as if her duty to Jason wasn't quite complete. Chief Diana Montgomery had called that afternoon with news that the department had received dozens of calls and emails. Praising Nova's work, a local newspaper had run the headline, "Hero Dog Brings Justice After 4 Months of Silence," accompanied by a photo of Nova at the crime scene, her focused expression capturing the intensity that had broken the case. "You knew exactly what you were doing, didn't you?" Cassandra murmured, rubbing the spot behind Nova's ears that always made her lean in, appreciatively. "Breaking all the rules to make us listen." Nova turned to meet her handler's gaze. Those intelligent eyes communicating more than words ever could. Their bond had been tested and proven in the most challenging circumstances, reinforcing what Cassandra had always believed, that true partnership transcended conventional training and rigid protocols. Dr. Foster called, Cassandra told her partner, smiling at the memory of the conversation. "He said you've made him prouder than any research paper he ever published. Said he always knew you were meant for something extraordinary." The Malinois' ears perked up at the mention of her first trainer, her head tilting slightly as if asking for more details. "He's coming to visit next month, wants to see you, and bring some special training equipment he's developed." In that moment, watching the day's last light fade over the valley, Cassandra felt profound gratitude for the complex chain of circumstances that had brought them together. The behaviorist who had recognized Nova's potential, the difficult shepherd who needed the right handler, and the trust they had built that allowed Nova's extraordinary gifts to shine when it mattered most. What others had seen as stubborn disobedience had been revealed as uncommon wisdom, the ability to recognize when human rules needed to be broken for a greater purpose. As they made their way back to the car, the first stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky, Cassandra's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Seeing Captain Morgan's name on the display, she answered immediately. "Winters," she said, her professional tone belied by the weariness in her voice. "I owe you an apology," Morgan said without preamble. "I've been skeptical about some of Nova's unconventional approaches, but after what happened in that forest, I think it's time we reconsidered our training protocols." "Harinimam." Cassandra was momentarily speechless. Captain Morgan was known for his rigid adherence to procedure. An admission like this was unprecedented. "I'm listening," she said cautiously. "I've been talking with Chief Montgomery. We want to establish a specialized unit focusing on cold cases and unusual search scenarios, cases where conventional methods have failed." There was a pause. "We'd like you and Nova to head it up." The offer caught Cassandra completely off guard. She had expected commendation for the Bennett case, perhaps even a formal recognition ceremony, but not a promotion to lead a specialized unit. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "Say yes," Morgan replied. "We need officers who understand that sometimes the rulebook doesn't have all the answers. You've demonstrated that you know when to trust your partner's instincts over conventional wisdom. That's rare. Winter's invaluable." As Nova watched her expectantly from the passenger seat, Cassandra felt a surge of emotion. The Harper case had nearly driven her from police work altogether. Now she was being offered a chance to build something new, something that could bring closure to families who had waited too long for answers. "When do we start?" she asked. "Monday or 800 hours. You'll have your pick of cold cases to review." Morgan's tone softened slightly. "And Winters, bring that exceptional dog of yours. She's earned her place at the table." As she ended the call, Cassandra leaned across to scratch Nova behind the ears. "Looks like we're getting a promotion. Girl special assignments. Cold cases, the tough ones where nobody else has found answers. Rawr." Nova's tail thumped against the seat, her dark eyes fixed on Cassandra's face with an intensity that somehow conveyed complete understanding. "It won't be easy," Cassandra continued, starting the engine. "But then we've never done things the easy way, have we?" The drive back to the city was quiet, both handler and dog lost in their own thoughts. The events of the past few days had changed something fundamental in their partnership. What had begun as a professional relationship had deepened into something more profound, a connection based on mutual trust and respect that transcended conventional understanding. For Cassandra, the change represented a kind of healing. The darkness that had nearly consumed her after the Harper case had receded further, replaced by a sense of purpose that felt both new and familiar. There would always be evil in the world, always be tragedies that defied comprehension. But there would also be moments of justice, of truth revealed, of light breaking through the darkness. And sometimes that light would come in the form of a stubborn Malinois who refused to follow commands when her extraordinary senses told her something more important demanded attention. As they pulled into the precinct parking lot, Cassandra noticed Laura and Michael Bennett standing near the entrance, clutching what appeared to be a framed photograph they had mentioned wanting to visit the station to formally thank the entire team, but she hadn't expected them so soon. "Come on, girl," she said, opening Nova's door. "I think someone wants to see you." Laura's face brightened as they approached her, grief momentarily lightened by genuine warmth. "We were hoping to catch you before you went home," she said, stepping forward. "We wanted to give you something." Michael held out the frame, which contained a candid photo of Jason on a mountain summit, arms outstretched against a backdrop of endless forest, his face alight with the joy of adventure. This was taken on his 16th birthday, his first solo hike. Michael explained, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "It's how we want to remember him, free doing what he loved." "Kiki?" "It's beautiful," Cassandra said, accepting the gift with reverence. "Thank you." "There's one more thing," Laura added, kneeling to Nova's level. From her pocket, she withdrew a small medallion attached to a leather cord. This was Jason's. He earned it in Scouts for Wilderness Survival Skills. We thought Nova should have it. She found him when no one else could. With gentle hands, Laura slipped the cord over Nova's head. The Malinois remained perfectly still, her usual professional demeanor tempered with an almost solemn awareness of the moment's significance. "She'll wear it with honor," Cassandra promised, overwhelmed by the gesture. "I'm so sorry for your loss. We'll always grieve for our son." Michael replied, his arm around his wife's shoulders. "But thanks to you and Nova, we can begin to heal." The not knowing was the worst part, the endless possibilities, the hope that kept getting crushed, the nightmares about him, suffering alone in the wilderness. Laura nodded, wiping away a tear. "Now we know it wasn't what we wanted to learn, but truth is better than endless uncertainty. We can bury our son, hold his friends accountable, and eventually maybe find some kind of peace." As the Bennetts said their goodbyes, Cassandra felt the weight of their gratitude settle around her shoulders, not as a burden, but as a reminder of why the work mattered. In a world where closure was often elusive and justice imperfect, moments like these reinforce the value of persistence, of following the evidence wherever it led, even when the path diverged from the expected route. Back in her apartment that evening, Cassandra placed the framed photo of Jason on her bookshelf next to the commendations and certificates she'd accumulated over her years in law enforcement. Nova settled on her bed nearby, the medallion still hanging around her neck, a tangible symbol of the lives they had touched. Opening her laptop, Cassandra began researching cold cases in their jurisdiction, making notes on those where unconventional search methods might yield new leads. The prospect of building a specialized unit from the ground up was daunting, but also exhilarating. She would need to select officers who understood the value of listening to their canine partners, who could balance protocol with flexibility when circumstances demanded it. As she worked, Cassandra found herself returning repeatedly to a case from 2 years earlier, a young woman who had vanished from a hiking trail in the national forest, leaving behind only an abandoned backpack and unanswered questions. The search had been extensive but ultimately fruitless, eventually scaled back as resources were diverted to more recent cases. "What do you think, Nova?" she asked, glancing at the Malinois. "Should this be our first official assignment?" Nova lifted her head, ears forward, eyes focused on Cassandra with that penetrating intelligence that sometimes seemed almost supernatural. It wasn't anthropomorphizing to recognize the connection between them, the wordless communication that had developed over years of working side by side, reading each other's cues, trusting each other's instincts. "I think so too," Cassandra replied to the unspoken response. First thing Monday, we'll pull the files and see what everyone missed. As she closed her laptop and prepared for bed, Cassandra felt a sense of anticipation that had been missing from her professional life for too long. The darkness of the Harper case would always be part of her, a scar on her psyche that would never completely fade. But now it was balanced by something else. The knowledge that sometimes, in the most unexpected moments, truth could emerge from the shadows, justice could be served, and families could find the answers they had been denied for far too long. And sometimes that justice began with a dog who refused to follow the rules. The following Monday morning dawned clear and cold, the first hint of frost glittering on the grass outside Cassandra's apartment building. As she prepared for the day, the significance of what lay ahead wasn't lost on her. Today marked not just a new assignment, but a fundamental shift in her career, an opportunity to redefine how she approached law enforcement and what role she would play in the pursuit of justice. Nova seemed to sense the importance as well, her usual morning energy tempered with a focused alertness that Cassandra had come to recognize as her working mindset. The Malinois sat patiently as Cassandra attached her specialized vest, the medallion from the Bennetts now a permanent addition to her equipment. "By our big day, partner," Cassandra murmured, checking to ensure the vest fit properly. "Our first day running the new division." The drive to the precinct was quiet, both handler and dog lost in their own thoughts as the city gradually awakened around them. When they arrived, Cassandra was surprised to find Chief Montgomery waiting in the parking lot, a cup of coffee in each hand. "Thought you might need this," the chief said, handing one of the cups to Cassandra as she exited the vehicle. "I remember my first day heading up a division, exciting and terrifying all at once." "Thank you, Chief," Cassandra replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I'm still not entirely sure why you chose me for this. There are more experienced officers in the department." Montgomery watched as Nova emerged from the vehicle, the Malinois immediately alert in scanning her surroundings. "Experience isn't always measured in years. Winters," the chief said thoughtfully. "What you and Nova demonstrated in the Bennett case, that's what this division needs. The ability to see beyond conventional approaches, to trust instincts over procedure when the situation demands it." As they walked toward the building, Montgomery continued, "I've allocated space on the second floor for your team. It's not fancy, but it's private and has enough room for your operations. You'll have access to all departmental resources, plus a discretionary budget for specialized equipment and training." Inside, Cassandra was led to a large room that had previously been used for storage. It had been cleared and renovated, with several desks arranged around the perimeter, a conference table in the center, and a smaller private office in the corner. The walls were bare, except for a large map of the county and surrounding jurisdictions. "Your team will be small to start," Montgomery explained. "You 3 other officers and 2 additional K-9 units. I've selected people who have demonstrated the kind of intuitive approach we're looking for, but the final decisions are yours. If you don't think someone fits, say so." Cassandra nodded, surveying the space with growing appreciation. "And our mandate, what to clean? Cold cases, primarily missing persons, unidentified, remains unsolved homicides where conventional methods have failed. You'll also be available for special search operations when unique challenges arise." Montgomery paused, her expression serious. "I'm giving you a lot of latitude, Winters. Don't make me regret it." "I won't, Chief," Cassandra promised. "We'll make this work." After Montgomery departed, Cassandra spent the next hour setting up her workspace, arranging files and familiarizing herself with the resources available to the new division. Nova explored the room, methodically investigating every corner before settling on a specialized bed that had been placed near Cassandra's desk. At 9:30, the first of her team members arrived, Officer Elena Rivera, a veteran K-9 handler whose Bloodhound Scout had an impressive record for tracking missing persons. Rivera's approach to K-9 work aligned closely with Cassandra's, emphasizing the partnership between handler and dog, rather than rigid adherence to protocols. "So this is the famous Nova Rivera," said, kneeling to greet the Malinois at eye level. "Scout and I have been hearing a lot about you. That was impressive work on the Bennett case." Chonnakin. Charm. Scout, a massive bloodhound with soulful eyes and pendulous ears, approached Nova cautiously, the two dogs performing the ritual of introduction with professional courtesy. After a moment of assessment, they seemed to reach an understanding, each returning to their respective handlers. "Thanks for joining the team," Cassandra said, extending her hand to Rivera. "Your work on the Riverside cases caught my attention. 3 recoveries when traditional search methods had failed." Rivera nodded, her expression a mixture of pride and solemnity. "Scout has something special. He doesn't just follow scent, he reads the story it tells. The problem is getting humans to listen to what the dogs are saying." "That's exactly what this division is about," Cassandra replied. "Creating space for what our partners know that we don't." By noon, the rest of the team had arrived. Officer Marcus Chen with his German Shepherd Shadow, Detective Sofia Alvarez, a seasoned investigator with a background in behavioral analysis, and technical specialist Ryan Delgado, whose expertise in digital forensics had solved several high-profile cases. As they gathered around the conference table for their first briefing, Cassandra felt a momentary flutter of uncertainty. These were experienced professionals, some with many more years on the force than she had. Would they respect her leadership? Follow her unconventional approach? Taking a deep breath, she laid out the case files she had selected for their first investigation. Amber Collins, 22, disappeared while hiking in the National Forest 2 years earlier. Despite an extensive search operation involving multiple agencies, no trace of her had ever been found beyond her abandoned backpack, discovered half a mile from the main trail. The original investigation focused on the areas immediately surrounding the main hiking trails. Cassandra explained, spreading maps and photographs across the table. They worked under the assumption that Amber had become lost or injured while hiking alone. Detective Alvarez studied the case notes with a furrowed brow. They ruled out foul play, no evidence to suggest it. Cassandra confirmed no known enemies, no suspicious activity on her accounts, no witnesses reporting anything unusual. The working theory was that she went off-trail, possibly to take photographs. She was an amateur photographer and either fell or became disoriented. "But you don't buy it," Delgado observed, noting the skepticism in Cassandra's tone. "I think they made assumptions that narrowed their search parameters too quickly." She replied, "That's why I've chosen this as our first case. We're going to approach it without preconceptions. Let the evidence and our canine partners guide the investigation rather than our expectations." As the team continued discussing the case, Nova suddenly stood, her attention fixed on the doorway, where Captain Morgan had appeared, his expression unreadable as he surveyed the newly formed unit. Captain Cassandra acknowledged a flicker of tension running through her. Despite his support for the new division, Morgan's presence still carried the weight of their previous disagreements about Nova's training and Cassandra's handling methods. "Winter's War," he replied with a nod. "I wanted to see how the new division was settling in." His gaze moved around the table, assessing each team member before returning to Cassandra. "The Collins case, I see." "Yes, sir. We believe it warrants fresh examination." Morgan was silent for a moment, his experience evident in the careful way he considered his next words. That was a difficult one. Multiple agencies, hundreds of volunteer hours, 3 separate K9 teams. Nothing found beyond that backpack, which is precisely why we've selected it, Cassandra replied, standing her ground. "Our approach will be different. We'll work from the evidence outward without assumptions about what must have happened." To her surprise, Morgan nodded slowly. "Good. That's exactly what I hoped you'd say." He moved closer to the table, examining the map they had spread out. "The original search focused here. Here and here," he indicated, pointing to areas surrounding the main trails. Standard protocol for a lost hiker scenario. "But if it wasn't a standard scenario," Cassandra began. "Exactly." Morgan finished for her. "If you're willing, I'd like to be kept apprised of your progress. Not to interfere," he added quickly, seeing the hesitation in Cassandra's expression, "but to learn what happened in that forest with Nova. It's made me reconsider some long-held beliefs about how we conduct our operations." Kurosho. The admission, delivered with characteristic gruffness but unmistakable sincerity, shifted something in the dynamic between them. Where there had been friction, now there was the possibility of mutual respect, a recognition that both had something to learn from the other. "We'd welcome your input, Captain," Cassandra replied, genuine appreciation in her voice. "You have experience that could be valuable to this team." As Morgan departed, the tension in the room eased, the team returning to their discussion of the Collins case. With renewed focus, plans were made for a site visit the following day, with each team member assigned specific aspects of the investigation to review overnight. By late afternoon, as the others began gathering their things to depart, Cassandra found herself standing at the window, watching the lengthening shadows as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Nova sat beside her, a solid presence that grounded her amid the swirling possibilities of what lay ahead. Officer Winters, Detective Alvarez, approached, jacket draped over her arm. "I just wanted to say I requested this assignment specifically because of what you and Nova achieved in the Bennett case. That kind of intuitive partnership, that willingness to follow the evidence, even when it contradicts expectations, that's rare. I'm honored to be part of this team." After Alvarez left, Cassandra knelt beside Nova, taking a moment to mentally prepare for the challenges that awaited them. The Collins case would be just the beginning. There would be others, many others, where families waited for answers, where conventional methods had failed, where the truth remained hidden beneath layers of assumption and procedural limitation. "We've got our work cut out for us, girl," she murmured, stroking Nova's sleek head. "But I think we're ready." Nova's dark eyes met hers with that penetrating intelligence that had drawn Cassandra to her from the beginning. In that gaze was a promise, unspoken but clear, that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, united in their search for truth. As they left the precinct that evening, the first stars appearing in the darkening sky, Cassandra felt a profound sense of rightness. The path that had led from the darkness of the Harper case to this moment hadn't been easy or straightforward, but it had brought her to a place where her unique perspective was valued rather than questioned, where Nova's extraordinary abilities could be fully utilized rather than constrained. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new searches, the beginning of their quest to find Amber Collins and bring closure to yet another family waiting for answers. But tonight, walking side by side with the partner who had taught her to trust instinct as much as evidence, Cassandra allowed herself to feel something that had been missing for too long: hope. Hope that their work would matter. Hope that their approach would succeed where others had failed. Hope that the truth, no matter how long buried or carefully concealed, would eventually come to light. And sometimes that truth would begin with a dog who refused to follow the rules. The sun had barely crested the horizon when Cassandra and Nova arrived at the trailhead, where Amber Collins had last been seen. The morning air was crisp and clear, the forest awakening around them as birds began their dawn chorus. It was easy to see why Amber, an avid photographer, had been drawn to this place. The play of light through the trees created a natural cathedral, both serene and humbling in its beauty. The rest of the team arrived in quick succession: Rivera and Scout Chen and Shadow, along with Detective Alvarez and technical specialist Delgado. They gathered around the topographical map spread across the hood of Cassandra's vehicle, reviewing the plan they had developed the previous day. The original search concentrated here. Cassandra indicated, tracing a wide circle around the main trail. Standard protocol for a lost hiker, expanding rings working outward from the last known location. They found her backpack here about half a mile off trail and focused their efforts in this quadrant, Tanakaninurin, but they never found any other trace. Alvarez noted, studying the terrain features on the map. No clothing, no personal items, not even scuff marks on the rocks or broken branches that might indicate someone in distress moving through the area, which suggests either she was extremely careful in her movements, Chen observed, or she wasn't moving through the area under her own power. Cassandra finished quietly. It was the possibility that had been nagging at her since she'd first reviewed the case. The scenario the original investigation had considered, but ultimately dismissed due to lack of evidence. We'll work backward from the evidence we do have." She continued, her tone shifting to brisk professionalism. "The backpack's location is our starting point, but we won't make assumptions about how it got there or where Amber went afterward. The dogs will lead this search, not human expectations." As they made their way along the trail, Cassandra felt a familiar tension building in her shoulders. Cold cases were always challenging, but missing persons carried a unique weight. The possibility, however faint, that the individual might still be alive, somewhere waiting to be found. After 2 years, that possibility was vanishingly small for Amber Collins, but it couldn't be dismissed entirely. The hike to the backpack's recovery location took nearly an hour, the terrain growing more challenging as they moved away from the maintained trail. When they reached the small clearing where the item had been found, Cassandra took a moment to absorb the scene, trying to see it through fresh eyes rather than the lens of the previous investigation. It was an unremarkable spot, not particularly scenic or unusual, just a small open area surrounded by dense forest. No distinctive features that would draw a photographer's attention. Why would Amber have come this far off trail to such an ordinary location? "Let's begin," Cassandra said, removing the sealed evidence bag containing a scarf that had belonged to Amber from her pack. The item had been preserved specifically for scent work, untouched by other handlers, to maintain its integrity for the dogs. Each handler presented the scent article to their respective canine partner, allowing them to develop a thorough scent picture before beginning the search. Nova's focus was immediate and intense, her nostrils flaring as she processed the complex olfactory information. "Find her, Nova," Cassandra commanded, softly releasing the lead. "Show me, Rari." The 3 dogs moved out simultaneously, each working a different sector of the clearing. Scout the bloodhound focused on the ground, his powerful nose detecting the faintest traces of human passage. Shadow worked the perimeter, methodically checking the surroundings. Nova moved with laser-like precision, alternating between air scenting and groundwork as she built a comprehensive scent picture. Delgado had set up a sophisticated GPS tracking system that would record the dogs' movements in real time, creating a digital map of their search patterns that could be analyzed later. Alvarez moved quietly around the clearing, her trained eye looking for anything the original investigators might have missed: broken vegetation, displaced soil, any sign of human activity. 10 minutes into the search, Nova stopped abruptly, her body language shifting from methodical investigation to focused interest. She circled a small area near the edge of the clearing, then sat, indicating a find. Cassandra approached carefully, aware that any evidence would be extremely fragile after 2 years of exposure to the elements. "What have you got, girl?" Kneeling beside Nova, she examined the ground carefully, eventually spotting what had caught the dog's attention. A small piece of metal partially buried in the soil, its surface tarnished but still recognizable as part of a camera mount. "Delgado," she called, "we need documentation over here." The technical specialist arrived with his equipment, photographing the item in situ before carefully extracting it from the soil. "It's a quick-release plate from a tripod," he confirmed, examining it closely. "Matches the brand of equipment Amber was known to use. Nasa Nawando Chari." As Delgado continued processing the find, Nova moved on, working her way toward the eastern edge of the clearing, where a faint game trail disappeared into the underbrush. Her pace quickened, tail held high in the position that indicated growing interest. Cassandra followed, observing Nova's behavior closely. This wasn't a direct alert yet, but it showed that her partner had detected something worthy of investigation. The game trail narrowed as they moved deeper into the forest, eventually becoming little more than a hint of passage through the dense vegetation. 50 yards in, Nova stopped again, this time with more urgency in her posture. She circled a small area, then began to dig gently at the base of a fallen log. "Hold, Nova," Cassandra commanded, moving forward to investigate. Brushing away the accumulated leaves and debris, she found a small heap of cloth, degraded by exposure, but still recognizable as a woman's scarf. The pattern matched the description of what Amber had been wearing on the day she disappeared. "Second find," she called into her radio. Approximately 50 yards east of the clearing, just off the game trail, appears to be a scarf matching the victim's description. Key, as the team converged on the location, Shadow and Scout also indicated interest in the area, confirming Nova's find with their own alerts. The three dogs then continued along the game trail, moving with increasing purpose as they followed what appeared to be a strengthening scent trail. The path began to descend gradually, leading them toward a small ravine that hadn't been included in the original search perimeter. The terrain became steeper, making progress difficult for the human members of the team, but the dogs moved ahead confidently, clearly following a defined scent pattern. Near the bottom of the ravine, all three dogs alerted, simultaneously focusing on a particular section of the rocky stream bed that cut through the center of the depression. Their behavior was unmistakable. This was a significant find, not merely an area of interest. Cassandra felt her heart rate accelerate as she made her way down the steep slope, careful not to disturb any potential evidence. The other handlers followed, maintaining control of their partners, while allowing them to continue indicating the specific location of interest. "They're all alerting to the same spot," Rivera observed, her expression grave. "And look at their behavior. This isn't a passing interest. They're picking up a strong scent picture." The stream was shallow, barely ankle deep, flowing over a bed of smooth stones and gravel. The dogs had focused on a section where several larger rocks created a natural pool, the water moving more slowly around the obstacles. "We need to investigate this area thoroughly." Cassandra decided. "Delgado, can you document the scene before we proceed?" "Alvarez, I'd like your eyes on the surroundings. Look for anything that seems out of place or deliberately arranged." As the team worked, Cassandra took a moment to assess Nova's behavior. The Malinois remained fixated on the pool area, occasionally whining softly, a sound Cassandra had learned to associate with frustration when a scent source was present but not immediately accessible. "Something's there," she murmured to Rivera, who stood nearby with Scout. "Something underneath the rocks or embedded in the stream bed?" Scout's behavior suggests the same. Rivera agreed. "He's giving me his strongest alert, the one he uses when he's absolutely certain." After Delgado had thoroughly documented the scene, they began the careful process of examining the pooled area, moving stones methodically while maintaining their positions for later reconstruction. 20 minutes into the process, Chen uncovered something wedged between two larger rocks: a woman's wristwatch, its leather band disintegrated, but the face still intact behind its cracked crystal. "Serial number matches," Delgado confirmed after consulting his tablet. This was Amber's watch, listed in the original missing persons report. The discovery energized the team, confirming that they were on the right track. They continued their methodical examination of the stream bed, eventually uncovering additional items: a single earring, several shirt buttons, and most significantly, a damaged cell phone buried beneath several inches of gravel. The current must have carried these items downstream. Alvarez theorized, studying the arrangement of the finds. They accumulated here where the rocks created a natural catch basin. But where did they come from? Cassandra wondered aloud, looking upstream. The ravine extended for nearly a quarter mile before rising back to the level of the surrounding forest. If Amber's belongings had been transported by water, their original location could be anywhere along that distance. The dogs, however, seemed to have their own ideas. After the initial discoveries, Nova had begun working her way upstream, her nose close to the water's edge as she tracked the scent source to its origin. Shadow and Scout followed similar paths, all three dogs moving with the focused determination that told their handlers they were onto something significant. 200 yards upstream, the ravine narrowed and deepened, the sides becoming steeper until they formed a small box canyon with walls rising nearly 30 feet above the stream bed. At the base of the northern wall, partially concealed by a fallen tree and accumulated debris, Nova stopped and gave her strongest alert. Yet a combination of sitting, pawing at the ground, and vocalizing that Cassandra had seen only in the most significant discoveries. "This is it," she said quietly, approaching the spot with careful steps. "Whatever happened to Amber, it happened here." The team worked with painstaking care to clear the debris without disturbing potential evidence. As they removed layers of branches and sediment, a dark opening became visible at the base of the canyon wall, a small cave entrance barely large enough for an adult to crawl through. "We need specialized equipment for this." Cassandra decided studying the opening, lighting protective gear, proper documentation tools, and we need to notify Captain Morgan before we proceed further. Within an hour, the scene had transformed from a quiet search operation to a fully equipped recovery site. Captain Morgan arrived with additional officers and equipment, including lighting systems and specialized cave exploration gear. A forensic team stood by, ready to process whatever they might discover inside the cavern. "Your team did outstanding work to get us here," Morgan acknowledged, standing beside Cassandra as they observed the preparations, especially the dogs. The original search never extended to this ravine. It was outside the projected range for a lost hiker scenario, which was the fundamental flaw in their approach. Cassandra replied, "They built their search parameters around assumptions about what must have happened rather than following the evidence wherever it led." Makiwana. Nova remained fixated on the cave entrance, her posture conveying absolute certainty. The other dogs showed similar conviction, all three indicating that what they saw lay within the darkness beyond the narrow opening. When the technical preparations were complete, Cassandra prepared to enter the cave alongside the forensic lead. Nova would accompany them. Her alerts had led them this far, and Cassandra trusted her partner's abilities in the challenging environment ahead. "Be careful in there," Morgan cautioned. "After 2 years, the site could be unstable. Safety first." The cave entrance required them to crawl on hands and knees for several yards before opening into a larger chamber approximately 15 feet in diameter. As they illuminated the space with their powerful lights, the beam caught something that made Cassandra's breath catch: a hiking boot, partially buried in silt, its leather weathered but recognizable. "We need full documentation," the forensic lead instructed, setting up specialized lighting that would allow them to photograph and record the entire scene before disturbing any evidence. Nova moved purposefully to the far side of the chamber, where the floor sloped downward into a depression filled with sediment and debris. Her alert was unmistakable, sitting, then looking back at Cassandra with the intensity that signaled a significant find. The forensic team worked methodically, documenting every aspect of the scene before beginning the careful excavation of the area Nova had indicated. As they removed layers of silt and cave debris, the grim truth they had all anticipated began to emerge. Human remains partially preserved by the cool, stable environment of the cave. Based on the clothing and physical characteristics, this appears consistent with Amber Collins. The forensic anthropologist stated after a preliminary examination, "We'll need dental records and DNA to confirm, but the initial indicators all match really." As the recovery operation continued, Cassandra took Nova outside, allowing her partner a break from the confined space and a chance to decompress after her intensive work. The Malinois sat beside her on a boulder overlooking the ravine, both of them contemplating the discovery they had made and what it meant for Amber's family. "You found her, girl," Cassandra murmured, stroking Nova's head. "After 2 years, when everyone else had given up, you found her." Captain Morgan approached, his expression somber but satisfied. "The ME thinks she fell," he said without preamble. "Fractured femur, likely unable to climb out of the ravine. She made it to the cave, perhaps seeking shelter, but couldn't get back out for help. The working theory is that she died from her injuries or exposure. It wasn't what her family hoped for," Cassandra acknowledged. "But at least now they'll have answers. They can bring her home, lay her to rest properly. This is exactly why your unit exists," Morgan said, gesturing toward the cave entrance where the recovery operation continued. "Conventional methods failed here because they followed procedure rather than evidence. Your approach, letting the dogs lead rather than human assumptions, that's what made the difference." As they prepared to transport Amber's remains back to the medical examiner's facility, Cassandra found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the training exercise in Evergreen Ridge Forest, where Nova had first demonstrated her extraordinary persistence to the formation of their specialized unit, to this discovery that would finally bring closure to a family that had waited too long for answers. It was a path defined by trust, by the willingness to listen when conventional wisdom fell short. Later that evening, standing in the conference room where their case files were spread across the table, Cassandra addressed her team. "What we accomplished today matters," she said simply, "not just for Amber's family, but for what it represents. There are other cases waiting, other families who need the closure we can provide." She gestured to the wall where photos of additional missing persons had been arranged, silent testimonies to the work that lay ahead. "We have the tools, the expertise, and most importantly, the mindset to approach these cases differently, to follow the evidence rather than assumptions, to trust our partners when they tell us something that contradicts human expectations." Nova sat beside her, the medallion from the Bennetts catching the light as she surveyed the room with quiet dignity. Scout and Shadow rested nearby, all three dogs, somehow conveying an awareness of the importance of their work that transcended mere training. "Tomorrow we select our next case," Cassandra continued. "Today let's appreciate what we've achieved together." As the team dispersed heading home after an emotionally and physically demanding day, Cassandra remained behind Nova, faithful at her side. They stood together before the wall of faces, each representing a life interrupted, a story unfinished, a family waiting for answers. One by one, she promised quietly, both to herself and to those silent witnesses, "We'll find them one by one, if we..." Nova leaned against her leg, a solid presence that grounded her amid the weight of that commitment. The path ahead would not be easy. The answers, not always what families hoped to hear, but they would follow it wherever it led. Guided by evidence, instinct, and the extraordinary bond between humans and dogs that sometimes transcended explanation. In a world of rules and procedures, they had found a different way, a path illuminated, not by human certainty, but by canine instinct, by the silent wisdom of creatures whose perception extended beyond the limitations of human senses. It was a partnership that defied conventional understanding, but had proven its value in the most profound ways. And as they left the precinct together, heading home under a canopy of stars, Cassandra felt a deep sense of certainty that they were exactly where they needed to be, doing exactly what they were meant to do, bringing light to darkness, voice to silence, and truth to those who had waited too long to hear it, the truth that sometimes began with a dog who refused to follow the rules.